Okay, good afternoon, everyone. This is Dane Newquist. I'm the Marketing and Sales Director at PDG Professional Development Group. We want to welcome you to today's complimentary webinar, Partnering How to Fully Engage Your IT Department for Payment Security. We want to thank our sponsor, CampusGuard, for today's complimentary webinar. I'd also like to thank our speakers from Mississippi State University, that's Kevin Eldeblut and Meredith Jackson, for giving us their time today. Before I hand over the reins to Judy Sagai at CampusGuard, I want to go over some housekeeping rules today, as well as some upcoming events from PDG, so you can save your calendar dates. Just so that you know, we do mute all our lines, so attendees are not able to speak, but you can put any comments or questions in the chat box, which you see a comment in there. A little bit about if you're having any technical difficulties, you can contact Zoom. There's a 1-800 number there and a meeting ID if you can't hear or see our presentation today. Just as a reminder, we do record these, so we will send out the MP4 to you in an email. We also will send out a certificate of attendance with CPE credits. So if any of you are CPAs that need those credits, we make sure that we look at attendance for those. We do ask that you fill out 3 poll questions in order to get those CPE credits, which we will disperse through today's presentation. Just as a reminder also, in that email that I will send out to everyone as a follow-up, we ask that you fill out a brief survey so today's presenters can get feedback on the presentation. That is also a chance if we do not get to all of everybody's questions, you can ask our presenters questions in that survey. We do take questions at the end of the presentation. We will take them in the order that we receive them today. So if you do think about your question during the presentation and we are not getting to it, just rest assured we will save some time at the conclusion of the presentation. I want to let everybody know that at prodev.com you can see upcoming events that we have. We do have our student loan conference next on our agenda. That is going to be November 3rd through the 6th. That's going to be in Orlando, Florida. We are taking presentations for that. So if there's something that you want to present about, something that's happened at your school, anything in student financial services, please do so on our website or contact info@prodevmeetings.com. We are also excited about, and you'll see this new conference that is coming up. We have an AI and the Connected Campus Conference, which we're very excited about. We are also taking presentations right now for that as well. Think echo devices, connected campus services, security, those kinds of things, both cybersecurity, physical security. Those are the kind of topics that we are looking for the AI and Connected Campus Conference. I'll go ahead and introduce our webinar today. This is Partnering How to Fully Engage Your IT Department for Payment Security. Higher education institutes are amazingly complex organizations, and their scope of compliance regulation is wider than other industries. While virtually every industry faces significant cybersecurity challenges, higher education is particularly vulnerable. Higher education degree of openness and transparency has historically placed a focus on making sure faculty, students, the public, the donors can connect easily to resources, including payments across possibly numerous networks. This makes college and university networks an open and inviting target. Managing the balance between this openness and need for tight security has historically been a challenge for college and university administrators and IT staff alike. Getting business admin and IT aligned priorities and resources, however, is sometimes a different story. We're going to learn today how Mississippi State University, two sides of the coin, were able to work together to become and stay PCI compliant. Judy, I'll let you take over from here and introduce our guests. Thank you.
Terrific. Thanks very much, Dane. Good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. My name is Judy Sigge, and I'll be acting as host for today's webinar. I'd like to start off by introducing you to the presentation team. Kevin Edelblut is the AVP, Controller, and Treasurer at Mississippi State University, and his office is directly responsible for university financial matters like budget and payroll, student account services, treasury services, accounting, tax compliance, and insurance. Kevin received his BSBA degree from The Ohio State University with a dual emphasis in accounting and information systems, and he also holds an MBA with special emphasis on project management from Mississippi State University. Prior to joining the Mississippi State team, Kevin worked as a consultant with KPMG Consulting, where he worked on federal and state government agency projects to install client server and web-based ERP systems. He also worked for the Mississippi Department of Transportation as the Manager of Information Systems Outreach Services. Meredith Jackson is the Deputy CIO and Director of Enterprise Information Systems, or EIS, at Mississippi State University. Her team performs database administration, system integration and design, as well as planning, programming, implementation, and maintenance of administrative systems across the university. Meredith earned her BBA in Business Information Systems and an MBA from Mississippi State. She began working at MSU in 1993 as a computer programmer for information systems. She held several roles while working in information systems, including programmer analyst and, in partnership with HR, as a training and development specialist. Since joining EIS as a senior database analyst in 1997, Meredith has held roles of increasing responsibility, leading to her current role as director. And me. I've been fortunate enough to have worked in information security and compliance and relationship and project management in healthcare, technology, payments, and higher education over the span of 30+ years. In my current role at CampusGuard, I help to define our products and their associated implementation strategies, while at the same time developing the internal tools to manage project scope, goals, and deliverables. Additionally, I partner with my team members in the development of our online training courses and customer communications that we send out, like our newsletters or alerts. Lastly, as a member of the CampusGuard leadership team, I am the liaison between our customer advocate team and management, working to ensure that the voice of the customer is represented in our discussions and decisions. We're looking forward to a great discussion today, so I wanted to give you a quick overview of what we'll be going over. I'm sure you all already know that Mississippi State University is a large public institution, but Kevin will give you a better understanding of both the institution and their payment card processing environment. For those of you who aren't familiar with CampusGuard, I'll give you a quick introduction to us. We'll talk very quickly about what some of the more common challenges are that colleges and universities are facing when addressing PCI compliance. And then we'll hear from Kevin and Meredith about some of the specific challenges that they faced. We'll spend the bulk of our time together hearing about their approach to compliance and what their key takeaways were from this time. We'll end the webinar with some time for questions and answers from the team. I'm going to turn it over to Kevin now so that he can tell you about Mississippi State University. Kevin, may I ask you to give our guests an overview of Mississippi State?
Absolutely. Thank you, Judy, and good afternoon, everybody, or good morning, depending on your time zone. My name is Kevin Edelblut here at Mississippi State, and just as a high-level overview of the university, so we are a land-grant institution, and we were founded back in 1878. We've got a couple regional campuses, but the main campus is located in Starkville, Mississippi, which I've been told by several that it's conveniently located in the middle of nowhere. So, but it's a beautiful little college town. We're actually up in the northeast corner of the state of Mississippi. We're an R1 research university with very high activity in research, and our operating budget all in is just shy of $1 billion. Our fall enrollment last fall in 2018 was over 22,000 students. Of course, we've got undergrad, grad, and about 370 students that make up our vet med program here at the university. And in total, we've got close to 8,500 employees between faculty, staff, and students. And that's a high-level look at the university. If we dial in a little closer to look at card processing activities in our PCI compliance environment, in total, over the last year, we processed over 215,000 card transactions for a total dollar amount of $49 million. We've got 8 different merchant IDs that we use, and we have 157 order types around campus and throughout the state. So these are different departments that are using the card processing environment in some capacity. We also have deployed 130 encrypted card swipes for departments to use. We have put together 2 SAQs. Both of them are SAQDs. One is for the university proper, and then one is for the alumni foundation area. We do business with 17 different third-party vendors, and our PCI team that we have here at the university is comprised of 14 individuals. 4 of those come from the business office, 4 from the IT shop. We have 2 from athletics, 2 from the foundation, and then rounding out and completing that team is 2 members from our folks at CampusGuard. And having said that, I'll hand it back over to Judy to let her introduce her firm to you.
Terrific. Thanks, Kevin. For those of you who aren't familiar with CampusGuard, we're an information security, privacy, and compliance company that specializes in organizations that have complex campus-based environments, just like Mississippi State. We're thrilled this year to be celebrating our 10th anniversary. We're also proud to say that we are the only QSA ASV firm that is focused on higher education, with 95% of our customers within the higher ed vertical. Lastly, many of our security advisors and customer relationship managers come from the higher ed sector themselves. So what makes PCI compliance in higher ed such a big deal? Because some of the challenges that are common to higher ed don't exist in other industries. Yes, they take card payments, but the variability there is low, right? A target is a target is a target. Now you contrast that with Mississippi State. Where else do you know of that you can register for a class, play a round of golf, buy some flowers, and then stop by the store to pick up some muscadine grape juice on your way home? So here are some of the typical challenges we see facing our higher ed customers. First, the network on a college campus is often open and easily accessible to students, faculty, staff, and guests. IT is challenged to ensure that the network is secure, that sensitive student data and highly valuable research data are protected from outsiders. But that security has to be balanced against the limitations or constraints that can be introduced when adding in things like multi-factor authentication. Next, higher ed's all about collaboration, making sure that students can work on projects together, faculty can share ideas, and the institution can partner with outside organizations to do some of this groundbreaking research. This is more easily done when everyone has access to everything, but that creates a security issue of its own. So think about the custom applications that the theater wants to handle their business, the specialty systems that the foundation wants to use to retain their branding, and many of the other varied systems across campus that, oh, by the way, everyone wants to be integrated, and you have a view into the complexities of a typical college campus. Now add in the fact that technology changes every 12 to 18 months, and your customers are continually asking for more, faster, better, newer options. And you can see what a typical higher education institution is facing. Now you overlay that with the most prescriptive standard for information security, and you begin to see why this is such a big deal. So let's talk about PCI compliance in Mississippi State and talk a little bit about where things were when the team at State really got first going on this journey, right? What I remember from back then, we're talking early 2000s, there was an in-house developed payment application that was running on an AS400, old technology, a lot of dial-up terminals around campus, as Kevin had mentioned. Departments and merchants were coming to the team looking to add on additional either web-based applications or point-of-sale applications. There weren't at the time any central payment policies, and reconciliation was becoming a bigger and bigger issue. So Meredith, Can you give us some additional insight into what it was like for your team to be supporting this type of an environment?
Sure, Judy. We actually started taking credit card payments maybe even earlier than the 2000s. We were trying to think of when, but we first started with point of sale systems that were deployed, and we also took credit card payments via our registration system. And we were storing the cardholder data on the AS400 and in our ERP system. Both of those were large volumes, as one can imagine. But like you mentioned earlier, we had all of these various departments across campus doing their things too. They didn't have as much volume as registration and point of sale, but it still presented a challenge in finding all the pockets. We in IT, we wanted to ensure that the credit card holder data was encrypted, and we wanted to make sure that was it needed, and if it wasn't, could we remove it? We had credit card holder data that was being entered all across campus at general purpose workstations. And it was just the way we did business back then. Of course, PCI compliance came along, and that made us aware of the security concerns related to our complex environment.
Sure, that makes sense. Thank you. So Kevin, clearly the lack of having payment policies was cause for kind of variable behavior across the institution. But I'm sure the larger issue for your team was this day-to-day reconciliation.
Yeah, that's a good point. So from a payment policy standpoint, really we had two issues. One, we had a general policy out there that really didn't talk a whole lot to the notion of securing data and sensitive information. And it's not that we were acting carelessly. I mean, we used common sense and thought we were using good practices, but we didn't have anything, I think you used the term prescriptive, out there that we could provide guidance to the departments and other users. And especially when you look at the level of rigor that comes from a PCI compliance perspective, what those policies needed to be. We also ran into problems from a reconciliation perspective. As we said before, we had dial-up terminals all over the place. We had one merchant ID per dial-up device. Every day at the end of business, departments had to batch out, print a tape, create a manual cash receipt voucher. That had to go through campus mail to our account services office for somebody to manually key that information into Banner to reflect the cash on the books. Well, we were getting cash in the door. Well, sometimes the vouchers didn't make it or they got lost. And so what was happening in Banner didn't reconcile to what was happening on the bank account side. And the reconciliation was just a nightmare. We had paper and transactions going everywhere, and it had us pretty much wrapped up in knots on the reconciliation side.
Makes sense. Okay. Well, so that gives us a really good mental picture of the environment. So now let's talk a little bit about the specific challenges that this presented to your areas. Meredith, can I ask you to first talk about some of the technology challenges?
Sure, Judy. The first one was encryption, and the various systems that were storing the card holder data. We just wanted to make sure how were they encrypting it and whether the strong encryption. And that was, that was challenging because we were not in control of all the systems. Then we discussed, maybe we need to do network segmentation where credit cards were being taken, and that just was going to be expensive, and the amount of time and resources that it would require from the IT staff. So, we really needed consolidation. We needed standards so that we could get rid of the numerous systems and just get down to a couple of systems, as few as we could, and then we could manage it better. So really we were looking at what can we do to standardize this and not deploy so many different technologies across the campus. And IT really didn't want to be in this business. We didn't want to be in the credit card business. We wanted to be working on the business of the university, not spending, all these extra hours and resources just to meet compliance checkboxes.
Yeah, and I'm not sure I want to be in the card business either some days, but so it goes. But I'll say from the business side of things, the PCI compliance was getting more and more, enforced and communicated. We were being asked by banks and processors to show and attest that we were compliant, and we were very concerned about how we're going to bring this, disparate set of systems and processes into control. And that kind of goes back to the lack of policies. We didn't have anything in place that would consistently explain, this is how you do it, here's why you do it, and here's who you do it with. I mean, people wanted to bring on board all kinds of card processing solutions for their little niche needs. So we were very concerned about how we were going to bring that together. Because what we were looking for is we needed something that's going to provide some consistency and standardization and, of course, accuracy in the process. And the more we talked about it and looked at options and started understanding the risk of current practices, we really started looking to kind of outsourcing or transferring a bulk of the risk related to PCI compliance. And we eventually, in 2007, the fall, we implemented the solution with Nelnet to take care of our card processing for both the e-commerce side of the house as well as online student payments. And at that point, we sat down and just breathed a huge sigh of relief, because the mentality at the time was, as long as we're processing with Nelnet, we're PCI compliant. Just relax. If you want to do something different, the answer is no. You have to do it with Nelnet because it's PCI compliant. Well, the more I started going to conferences and talking to people and learning, the more I realized that PCI compliance goes much further than just having a secure payment vendor like Nelnet. It reaches deep inside the organization. I mean, it was much, much bigger than what I had anticipated, and that we had a lot of work to do at the university. But the question was, where in the world do we start? And that's where we engaged CampusGuard to come in. They performed, I think it was a 3 or 4 day readiness review, and it really helped us get our heads wrapped around what is the full scope of PCI compliance, how does it affect your campus, and then they gave us some good concrete steps for formalizing an approach to help us take that next step moving forward.
That makes a lot of sense. Thank you for that. That's really helpful. Okay. So then step one, right? You're underway with your PCI journey. Kevin said Mississippi State hired CampusGuard to do a gap analysis to help identify those areas of noncompliance. CampusGuard comes in, security advisor does an on-site assessment, delivers the report of findings and recommendations, but then what? What's that first step to heading down that journey? Well, the first step is to create a PCI team. Well, okay, maybe not that team that you see in the picture, but we hoped it would be one that was just as successful. Kevin and Meredith, can I ask you to talk a little bit about this first step that we took?
Sure. Once we did that readiness review and had a chance to sit down with the CampusGuard team and wander through the size and scale and scope of PCI, it was very apparent to me really quick that we needed help in the business office because it requires a great deal of technical expertise. There were so many things that we did not understand from a business side of the house, and we desperately were going to need help. It was an easy solution for us. I mean, our IT folks are top notch. They care deeply about security and compliance. And thankfully, they were very willing to assist when we, kind of reached out and asked them to come along and to assist. They understood the need and were very willing partners in the effort, which Meredith, how did that look from your perspective?
Sure.
Going back.
We have always, ITS has always worked closely with the business offices. We've got great relationships with our business offices. But even in IT, from IT perspective, we had to pull in several members from the IT team because my group is responsible for enterprise systems. and then we have another group that's responsible for the network, and of course we have a security officer. So we had to pull in expertise from all of those areas to work with Kevin's group. And then we also ended up including someone from Foundation, because they have their payment system over there, and athletics, to ensure that we were all working together. Those were both, athletics and foundations both had big, large volumes on different platforms that ITS did not support. Once we finalized the team with athletics and foundation, I think we were ready to get moving, to move on.
Terrific. Thanks, guys. So one of the things I thought we'd stop here just for a minute is I want to put a poll up for our guests to take. We've got a conversation going about the PCI team at Mississippi State. Kevin had shared that there were 14 team members. Can you guys, you should be seeing the poll on your screen here. There we go. And can you let us know how many people are on your PCI team? Do you have a PCI team? There's an option for less than 5. Are you like the folks at Mississippi State? Do you have around 14, 15? We'd be interested to know how many people you've got. I'm going to let this run for just a minute. All right, I'm going to put the poll off to the side. I'll leave it up for just a couple more minutes, and we'll go ahead and go on. So the PCI team at Mississippi State had created a project plan to achieve compliance and then split it into 5 main areas. Listed here, those were we first wanted to kind of complete and have ready to submit that self-assessment questionnaire and associated attestation of compliance. As Kevin had mentioned, we anticipated the banks and processors would be interested in that information. So the first thing we wanted to do is get that completed. Next, we wanted to look for opportunities to reduce the PCI burden on the university staff, as Meredith had mentioned. They then began to tackle the issue of university-level policies and procedures for PCI, securing the remaining cardholder data environment, and then, of course, training. So let's talk about each of these, and then in specific, how Kevin and Meredith's teams were able to work together to address each of these different areas. So Kevin and Meredith, thinking about the environment when we began, things were still in a state of flux, right, insofar as your payment environment and the solutions that you were using. The current version of the PCI DSS at that time was version 3.1, which meant if you were going to be completing that SAQD, we were looking at 326 questions. So can you tell us a bit about your approach to getting this completed?
Yeah, as far as the SAQ, the AOC, we opted, as I mentioned before, for the SAQD. And that was a large undertaking that required assistance, obviously from our side as well as the IT perspective. And we knew we needed to get that done immediately. It had been several years. We did one, probably 07, 08 when we first went up with Nelnet, but hadn't done one since. So we knew we were outdated and behind, and especially that the banks and the processors were starting to ask. So we knew it was coming, and we needed to get there quicker rather than later. And we needed it to be as accurate as possible, obviously, based on the environment that we had. And I'll be honest, that was a difficult thing, because you feel like you're failing a test. I mean, you're going through and, answering all these questions. Do you do it? No. Do you do it? No. And you start getting really worried that you're exposed, which I guess to a certain degree you are. But that was a good part of the process to really understand that, and to be able to articulate that to others as far as the importance of what we were trying to accomplish as a group. And the good news is, as you said, no, you were also putting in comments and ideas about, but this is how we're going to fix it. So here's our remediation plan. And as Meredith had mentioned earlier too, as far as just, the efficient use of time, we didn't want to be bogged down in compliance. They didn't need to be bogged down in compliance. So we needed to get this done as quickly as we possibly could, so that we could get back to normal jobs and the remediation piece, which is where Judy and CampusGuard really helped us as a team stay focused and organized and moving forward together. We had regular team conference calls. I believe they were on a monthly basis. to sit down, walk through, and complete the questions on the SAQ, and then using the PCI SSCs, this prioritized approach, to help drive those remediation plans so that we knew when we were done, okay, this is what we need to work on next to keep moving forward as far as the PCI environment. Just from collaboration perspective, again, we desperately needed both sides of the house to be part of the process. And it was interesting for me because I got to learn a lot of new terms and terminology and things that go on around me. I can now impress my kids with terms like dark fiber and on-prem and things like that. And they think I'm really, really smart. So, and just basically due to the breadth and the depth, it required that, organized group of 14 people that have different perspectives and expertise. And then some of the tools that we used, again, that SAQ matrix that I talked about, helped us answer the questions, put together a plan, and then prioritize the plan. And then, of course, the online portal that CampusGuard provided us was superb, where we, shared documents, kept the SAQ data stored and maintained there. So that's really kind of how we approached it as far as getting that SAQ wrestled down, Judy.
Thank you for that illumination. Yeah, that was good times. I remember that. So big task number 2 was reducing PCI scope. And as Kevin mentioned, we got the prioritized approach completed, and we now knew for sure how big that scope was and what the effort was going to be to reach and maintain PCI compliance. So we talked about a lot of ways that you could do this and found a few options that were a good fit for Mississippi State. So Meredith, let's start with you on this one. Majority of the work of PCI falls to the IT team. So as a leader of the organization, you had a vested interest in both the sustainability of the business as well as the efficiency of new technology that was going to be brought into the university environment. How did you approach this challenge?
Well, Judy, as mentioned earlier, maintaining the existing environment was not an option for us. The entire network of the university would have been in scope, and that's thousands of systems. We would have had to install a firewall at the border of the credit card environment and ensure that the firewall has both ingress and egress rules for all systems. We would have to collect logs for all the devices, event logs, firewall logs, switch logs, and we would have had to put them in a centralized, logging server. And somebody would have to review that. So we would have to perform vulnerability scans at least quarterly, and after any kind of significant change. Same thing for penetration tests. We would have to perform penetration tests quarterly, and after significant changes. So that was kind of would have been a huge undertaking for ITS resources. So we started looking to P2PE technology so that we could get the network out of scope. Of course, P2PE was fairly new technology at the time, and there weren't many validated vendors, but we really liked this option. It looked like a good option for us. So if we had P2PE, it would reduce the scope, obviously. We wouldn't have to do the physical segmentation. So we started looking, we did find some, but getting, like I mentioned, foundation and alumni, they were working with third-party vendors different from Nelnet, so they would have to find a working P2P solution also. We even threw around the idea one time of account services to quit taking credit cards in the office and only doing it, via the web, telling people to log into the web. So as you can see, we really wanted to reduce the scope to get the network out of scope.
Yeah, and I know when we're going through this too, we got to make sure that whatever solution we're coming up also works for the business of the organization, because as you can spend all your money and resources and time on tools and technology and locking things down and then go out of business because you just put too much on it and you've ignored some of the fundamental things that you need to do day to day. And you can also spend time and attention coming up with rules and regs and protocols and policies, and you just tie yourself up in knots and bureaucracy, and you can't hardly function either. So we had to find a way that was going to balance out, the risks and the rewards to make sure that we were compliant, but we weren't wearing ourselves out and losing focus on what we're here to do in the process. And I know Meredith was talking about the P2PE, we had to go out and just see what the options were and to figure out what sort of hardware existed. Was it PCI validated? Was it not? If it wasn't, could we still use it and take a step forward in our PCI scope reduction efforts? And we ultimately ended up working with our processor with Nelnet, and they had provided us an encrypted card swipe solution that we ended up deploying. And of course had to work with the IT group to make sure that everything was copacetic and ready to go from that standpoint. And then really kind of putting together the plan for the future now that we knew that, well, here's the card devices. And as Meredith was alluding to earlier, the notion of discontinuing payments in certain areas. So what we ended up doing is we actually did stop taking credit card payments on site in account services. And it really was not that big of a deal. And I'll be honest with you, the thing that's always astounded me was for as technologically savvy as these students are, why they would line up and stand over in Garner Hall across campus to make a payment that they could do on their phone. When they're on their phone, seems like 90% of the day anyway. So there was a little bit of confusion, maybe a little bit of pushback, but we ended up turning off that capability. So we said you can no longer process payments here on premises for student accounts. And then we started deploying those point-to-point encrypted devices. And what we did is we started, because we had, like I said, we had 130 that we ultimately had to get out. Well, we focused on our top highest volume departments. And we ended up, once we locked down probably about 10% of our highest volume people, that covered 90% of our transactions. So we were able to quickly reduce and limit our exposure just by turning off some card processing here and deploying some point-to-point encrypted hardware in some high concentration areas. And that gave us some breathing room to roll the rest of them out after that.
Awesome. Thank you for that. All right. So now you knew what the plans were for the payment environment, but we needed to formalize that process. Again, these changes impacted both of your teams and, led by the PCI team, required that they align with and complement each other. So Kevin, can you talk a little bit about how you identified, updated, and released those payment-related policies and procedures across the organization?
Yeah. That was kind of a toughie for me. It was just so big and kind of hard to get started because we had a general policy regarding PCI compliance, but it lacked quite a bit. And I know there are templates out there, and we looked at those to see what we could leverage. But at the end of the day, we just decided to start from scratch and create our own policies. And really what we did back on that matrix that we talked about, we pulled all the little different requirements as we went through and said, this needs a policy, this needs a policy, this needs a policy. And I put all those together and we just basically matched them up into categories, for lack of a better term. And from that, we ended up heavily modifying the existing policy. We created another policy for securing payment devices and one specifically related to safeguarding cardholder data. And getting those policies reviewed and approved and through executive council was a very easy process. Thankfully, our culture is sensitive to security issues, and it's not difficult to articulate the needs, again, after going through this process of why it's important. And then it was just a matter of rolling out those new policies and communicating it to the departments as well. So.
On the ITS side, we needed to do extensive rewrite to our incident response plan, which we did. And really, with Kevin's policies, and we rewrote that. And once we had gone to P2PE, it really becomes more of a business operations and user training function. So P2PE was really a great solution.
Terrific. Thank you. So next up on that list of 5 key areas is securing the cardholder data environment. We've been going back and forth, security, compliance. So before we get into the discussion of how you specifically addressed securing the cardholder data environment, Meredith, can I ask you to speak a little bit about how you see the difference between security and compliance?
Okay, Judy. Security, you know, it's practice for its own sake. It's not to satisfy some third party's needs. It's driven by the need to protect against, you know, constant threats that we're bombarded by. And security is never truly finished. It's going to be continuously maintained, and there's going to be continuous changes and improvements. Compliance, on the other hand, it's practice to satisfy an external requirement and facilitate a business operation. It's driven by a business need rather than a technical need. And compliance, unlike security, is done when the third party is satisfied and that checkbox is checked off.
Sure, sure. So when the bank sees you're compliant or the PCI Council says you are compliant, then you've met their requirements to get there and then just have to do it year over year. That makes sense. Well, thank you. So at this point then, Mississippi State has reduced or eliminated a lot of their areas of concern, but there were still a few merchant areas that had some complex payment environments. 2 of these did require quarterly vulnerability scanning, and then 1 solution had retained cardholder data. So one of the other things that I think our guests would really like to hear about from you guys was your decision to roll out multi-factor authentication. This was a fairly big deal given the fact that it impacted staff across the university. Can you talk a little bit about how your team addressed those issues?
Sure. We finally completed the remediation, the removal of the cardholder data. Like you said, we had 1 lingering system. It was actually a cloud solution, but we developed a contract with them, and we had them remove that cardholder data, so that's no longer being done. You know, that 1 system lingered, but like we said early in the presentation, we had so many systems that were storing it. We are so happy to have none on campus anymore. We did have to do the vulnerability scans for 2 units because they were waiting to get the P2PE devices. And so we did that in conjunction with CampusGuard for athletics and for foundation. And then, like you said, the multi-factor authentication, that was done not just for PCI compliance. We did that for security concerns, you know, because you do have people that respond to those email phishes. So we implemented Duo. And really, we had executive buy-in for this. Our CIO presented to our executive cabinet the need for, you know, a multi-factor authentication, and they were on board 100%. So we first we opted in for employees. They could start opting in the summer of 2017, and then we made it mandatory in February of 2018. And we really did not have any pushback. The university leaders really saw the need for it. So during that time for employees, students could opt in, and if students were student workers, they had to be in it, just like an employee. But during that opt-in period, we had students opt in, and then this past spring in February, we made it mandatory for students as well. So now we have over 27,000 users that are signed up for Duo, which has really decreased the number of, I guess, people that have given away their password and given access to somebody, because they can't give away that multi-factor key token.
Sure. No, that's fantastic. I know our offensive security services team have said that in and of itself is a huge security plus for any organization. All right, so that brings us to, as they say, the weakest link, the humans. So higher education is all about gaining and sharing knowledge, and knowledge is power in any environment. So whether or not a team member is directly involved with payment cards, they do have a direct impact on the security of the institution's data, which in turn can have a huge impact on that well-earned, well-respected reputation that you've built up over the years. As our offensive security services team will tell you, all they need is 1 person that clicks on that phishing link, and depending on their access, they now have an open door to your environment. And so I say this to kind of indicate that although we've put training as our last topic, it really is by no means the least important. So let's talk a little bit about how the PCI team at Mississippi State addressed this last and important component.
Yeah, absolutely. We ended up kind of dividing the population up into three main categories. So we had the main university, we had the foundation group, and then athletics. And they're really, as you can imagine, three different animals for three different reasons. So that's really how we subdivided it up and started wrestling it down. But we developed some training that was specific for the foundation, and some of the development officers who are out and about and, closing deals over dinner and getting sensitive information, as they're walking out of a restaurant. What do they do with it? How do they handle it? What's the best way to move forward? And then, of course, athletics with, the tickets and the donations and walking around the drill field, taking donations and gifts. So, and then for MSU as a whole, all of our different departments and then the student side of things. So rolling that out. The nice thing about it was we had options to look at. There's a lot of online stuff. I know CampusGuard provides online training that I'm drawing a blank on the format that it's in, but you can drop it right into your LMS system. That was something that's very appealing, but it's not quite where we wanted to go yet. We expect that to supplement our efforts in the future. But right now, we really focused on face-to-face because we wanted to get people in the room. It was new to them. We'd been around it for a while, but we wanted to be able to field questions and see the looks on their face and really find out from them how they are wrestling with the policies and the procedures in their day-to-day business. And that's really what the main training focused on, were the policies that we've rolled out, and not so much about the buttons that you push to process a transaction, because like Meredith was saying, between two-factor and point-to-point, we had that locked down. What we were focusing on was transmitting data, storing data, the destruction of data, things along those lines, and securing the data, locating, tracking devices, and the incident response plan that she mentioned. Those were the things that were really focused on during the training. And the one thing that we used to always get their attention was this notion of $1 million per breach per brand. And that's really what woke them up and made them understand this isn't a matter of just getting your hands slapped. And yes, there's reputational stuff, but there's big, big financial consequences for not paying attention to what we're telling you to do and doing it properly.
Yeah, that's a great point. $1 million is going to get everybody's attention very quickly. Well, this has been quite a journey for you both and your teams. As you look back in that rearview mirror, can you talk a little bit about some of those key takeaways or best practices that you would suggest to our guests?
Yeah, well, I'll tell you what, the first thing for me, do that baseline assessment, that readiness review. We went into it, we were satisfactorily terrified, but, still lacked a true understanding of the scope of what PCI truly meant. And to me, that was a critical first step in helping us lay that foundation to kind of line up a plan of attack, which, I don't know, you think?
The next bullet is engage procurement. And IT works really closely with the procurement offices on any kind of IT related purchases. So if there's an RFP for new software, we're involved, and the procurement team and the IT team, we make sure that every single RFP, if it's a system that's going to take credit card payments, Kevin's office actually develops some language that goes into those RFPs about the options that they have to make sure that what they're purchasing will meet PCI compliance.
Yeah, what we were doing is we were finding out, after an RFP was put together, bids came in, a contract was written, then they would call us and say, what's your banking information for the card processing we need to do? So this has allowed us to get on the front end of those conversations and head a lot of that off at the pass. And finally, I just say, be prepared for a challenge, because it's difficult, but don't panic, because it's possible. I mean, it's taken us 6 years, and there's still opportunities to change and improve and modify, but it can be done. Just pace yourself, don't give up, and make sure that you're prioritizing resources and keeping your eyes on the final goal. I know there were a couple things that we did midstream. So there's this idea that you can decentralize your SAQs. We have 157 departments, have each one of them do their own SAQ. Well, we were still learning it. They wouldn't understand it. We just felt it was best to centralize it. We would like to see that become part of the end user training, to where they're going in and doing their SAQ in the future. But that was something we deliberately set to the side and said, we're going to wait on that. And also, I know Meredith had mentioned the physical segmentation on the network. That was a quick way to lock things down. But we felt the long-term solution was the P2PE. Although we knew it was going to take probably longer, it was the right thing to do. We didn't want to spend our time segmenting the network, then turn around to do something that we knew we were going to have to do anyway. We just plowed that ground, and it made us run a little quicker, which is fine, but it helped us really think through where to apply our resources.
All
I'm going
right.
to add one thing that's not on here, and I know this is I just thought of it. Our PCI team, as Kevin mentioned, we had 2 people from CampusGuard on there, and they were tremendous. And if we had a question about, does this meet PCI compliance, we would shoot that question over the fence to them, and having their expertise was really invaluable as we were making decisions.
Thank you very much for that. So basically what you're saying is success for Mississippi State was business and IT working together.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
Yes.
All right. Well, at this point, we'd like to open it up to our guests. Any questions that you have for Kevin, Meredith, or myself? I know Dane had said there's a chat option or a Q&A option on your screen. So please feel free to shoot those over to us. Dane, I'm going to turn it back over to you now.
All right, great. Thanks for this. Just want to let everybody know we are recording today's presentation, so you can share this around the office. We got to put together these PCI teams, as we saw in our poll today. So this is a great resource to have. So we'll make sure that we send this out to everybody as an MP4, so you can fast forward, rewind, watch on your phones or iPads or laptops. We do have some more poll questions as we're getting in our questions coming in. I'm going to go ahead and launch our second poll, which is about training in general. Again, we require 3 points of engagement to issue our CPE credits. So I want to launch this poll. How do you like your training? In person at a conference or a workshop, online, blended online or in person, or on demand, meaning that it's not live? And then unsure. We do have a question. Are the slides available? I leave that up to the presenters, whether or not you want to give out your slides, but we do send an MP4 out that is a recorded video.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know how to do it, but we're certainly fine with releasing the information. That does not bother us at all. We'd be glad to. And I think they've got some contact information on there. If there's anything we can do, if you wanted to reach out, email, set up a phone call, come visit us in the big city of Stark Vegas, whatever works for you. So just let us know. We'd be happy to help.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and say that's answered. We do have another question from Tim. Who controls the PCI process? Is it usually business, IT, compliance? I guess that depends.
Yeah, I'd say at the end of the day, I felt like I was on the pointy end of the spear. And I don't know if that was just an evolution or just being in the wrong place at the wrong time, but I felt compelled to move it forward. But once we built that team really governs the processes, the decisions, and can come together to work out some of the more complicated issues on things. So it is truly a collective effort here.
And Kevin, you are in the business office, correct?
Yes, I'm sorry. That is correct.
All right, we do have another question. This comes from Pamela. Are your policies and procedures available to send out or on your website? Do you have a link on your website?
Yes, they are. So the main website is msstate.edu, and up in the search, if you just look for policies, that'll take you to the main policy site. And I think it's older, but it's budget and planning was a division. But there's 3 policies, and they should start with 62 dot something. I think it's like 08, 09, and 10. But they are out there online and available for you to access.
Kevin, you might share that with me after this presentation, and that way I can send that out to everybody for them to look at, if that's okay.
Sure thing. Sure thing.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and launch poll question number 3. This is just your preference on which webinar services you like to use. We are on zoom.us. I know PDG has used a company called ReadyTalk. That would be in the other category here, but the others are familiar. We do have another question from Tom. How flexible are SW vendors typically with integrating P2PE devices? Assuming the SW already supports a P2P device already.
They have been going that way. Like we said, athletics and foundation took a while longer because of their third-party vendors. They had to find a P2PE device that worked with their software. So what we see more frequently is when somebody is purchasing a software, there's an API, and we can write that API to use Nelnet.
And there are more P2P companies out there, right, that are integrated.
Right. To add on to that, remember that the P2PE validation only comes from the PCI Security Standards Council. Without that kind of certification, it is considered just an end-to-end encryption and doesn't allow for the reduced SAQ. So really that's, one of the things to just keep in mind. It may be equivalent technically from a security and encryption perspective, but what the PCI Council's certified solutions do allow for is the use of that smaller SAQ P2PE. So things to.
And I'll add too, as far as the encrypted side of things with Nelnet now, we're moving over to the bluefin devices, which are PCI Council certified. If we have vendors coming in, that is going to be part of their requirements. It goes in the RFP. And if they cannot prove that they have a PCI certified compliant device, we do not do business with them. That is an absolute no. It is non-negotiable, and I can go to the CFO and the president, and they will back me up on that.
Tom also asks, are you able to use a vendor who is not listed on either the PCI standard site or on Visa? Did you just answer that question, Kevin?
Say that again, Dane. I'm sorry.
The question was from Tom. Are you able to use a vendor who is not listed on either the PCI standard site or on Visa?
No, we do not.
Yeah.
They've got part of what's written in the RFP, and it'll be part of the contract, is they have to provide attestation information that they are certified, and any hardware that they're going to provide has to have that certification. And if they can't do those things, and then we also ask for integration. If they cannot do those things, then we do not do business with them.
Awesome. Okay. We've just got a couple more minutes, folks. So if you do have any last minute questions, you can put them in here. I will send out a survey where you can also add some questions in if you like. The emails are up on the screen if you want to directly contact either Kevin Meredith or Judy. Again, I will save this as an MP4 so you guys can make sure to watch the presentation backwards and forwards, pause, take notes, and use it and spread it around the office. I want to thank CampusGuard. Judy, thank you so much. Thank your team, Alyssa, and all the other guys. You were a great sponsor at our Bursar conference. We look forward to working with you again
Thank you, Dane.
in the future. That brings up another comment. We do have our our student loans conference coming up November 3rd to the 6th. That's going to be in Orlando, Florida. We are at the DoubleTree by Hilton on the Universal Park entrance. How convenient, right? So that is going to be in November. So all you cold states out there, it's a good way to go to a conference and train and get some warmth. We are taking presentations at info@prodevmeetings.com. So if you want to present at either the student loans or the new AI and Connected Campus Conference, please contact us there. We'll go ahead and conclude. I appreciate everybody being on the call today, and we're right at the top of the hour. So thanks, guys, for joining, and have a great rest of the week and Easter weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye now.